All right, let's see if everything's going. Should be going. All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another Blueprint for Peak Performance. I am Brandi Smith. I'm the founder of Perfect to Know Physical Therapy and Performance Training and Perfect 10 PT Academy, which is online courses for parents, coaches, and athletes, as well as medical providers. This is, for those of you that don't know me, I am a former two-time national champion collegiate gymnast, and I did other sports also growing up. I sometimes tell those stories. And I went on, so I started gymnastics when I was 3, started competing when I was 7, and set a really big goal at age 7. And in that process of achieving that goal, I had a 3-year battle with fear and some other small battles with fear, little toughs with fear, but a 3-year large battle with fear, some major injuries. I had some issues with eating as well in the process, and came through all of that and achieved my goal. After several failures, actually, getting cut from the gymnastics team, losing a scholarship, all kinds of things. I regained the scholarship by junior and senior year, and came back to contribute to a national championship on actually balance beam, which is the main place I had a 3-year battle of fear and lost the scholarship over. Well, got cut from the team over, lost the scholarship over an injury, and walked on. But the point being, as I came through all this experience and accomplished the goals, and in that process learned a lot about myself, a lot about the mind, and a lot about the body, which drove me to become a physical therapist, to go through and get a whole lot of education after that, become fellowship trained. I did a 3-year residency after physical therapy school. And then also I sought out a whole lot of other tools and skill sets in my process. And I since now work with athletes across the globe, from recreational athletes that are just having fun in their sports, all the way up to Olympic level athlete and current Olympic team and national team members in various sports, but in particular gymnastics as well. But I have worked with Olympians in other sports as well, um, running, and then Ironman's not really like, but the Ironman Olympics, the world championship of that. So that's a little bit about me, and I am here. I started my programs mostly to help spread this knowledge that I've gathered over the years and help the athletes I've worked with so that I can reach a broader audience and impact greater lives. So I'm here to answer questions for you, your athletes, the athlete in your life, you as an athlete, you as a coach or a parent, and help you guys grow together. If you're a parent and a coach, grow with your athletes, as well as help everyone along this journey, because no matter what role you play in the process of an athlete, there's a whole lot to take in. Like there's a lot to take in for yourself as a stable rock in the place of an athlete's journey, or as an athlete in the process yourself. So yes, so thank you, Patricia. Without further ado, I'm opening it up to the Q&A question. And Carla, you're coming in next. Yeah, Patricia mentioned Sean asked about handstands last week. Thank you, Patricia, for reminding us. Yes, we can talk about handstands and go from there. Carla, you had your hand up, so come on in first, and then we can head down that venture. But I'd love to hear what Carla has to say today. So Carla, come on in.
I do have a question as far as I figured, most people might want to know this question. When we're dealing with fear, we're dealing with, let's say backward tumbling. I know we're supposed to meet children kind of where they're wanting to do things, but I have an athlete that and sometimes I think that the more perfectionist they are, they only want to do it in one place because that's the only place that they would feel successful at. And so trying to convince them, parents and athletes, I guess, need to how to explain to them that they need to go and do those drills even though they don't want to, because that is it's a thing of I don't want to, I'm afraid of that, I only do it here. but we're trying to wean you off. Maybe you will do it with my spot, but now we have to wean you off of something. And so they don't really want to go back to all the drills that get you there in the first place.
This is a great question. I'd like to answer it because I think it's so important and such a big thing for everyone. So Carla, first of all, with this out, just so I can kind of get an idea of where you are, have you done a skill ladder progression with them? Have they written out their own ladder? Are we in a process where we don't have that at the moment?
Oh no, we've done all that.
Okay, so
We've
they
done all that, and then we've done all that, and then we achieve it, and then we'll have it for so many weeks, and then and we feel during those so many weeks, because we are like 13, in those so many weeks, we don't need to go back and do all those drills because we don't like them, or we can't do those. I can't do those, and so then, yeah. So then when I try to, okay, and you try to meet them where they are, um, but yeah, they don't. I mean, my philosophy is if you can really do it, you can do it anywhere in drills. But yeah, so I've tried both ways. I've tried the, meet them where they're at and allow them, all right, well, we're doing it on the floor and, all right, we're happy. And, if you don't like to do it, toe to knee, round up, back handspring down the incline, fine, not a problem. But it works, for a few weeks and then, yeah, we go right back at it. And if I push to, not push, but if I, you need to do this many before you get to do, this many here before you get to do this many here. If she gets, like that, if she starts to balk in those things, then she just blames those drills.
got it. Okay, so how to get a 13-year-old. So what I'm hearing, how to get a 13-year-old on board with what we know is applied neuroscience.
Yeah, well, you
So,
also have to get parents on board with that neuroscience as well, knowing that, I understand your child doesn't like these drills, but then the thing is that it now travels into everywhere. I don't
yeah,
like this and I don't like that. And I don't, so it's, it's actually becoming, I mean, in my head, it's a life thing. At some point in time, this is going to travel out into your life and you're just going to not do the things that you don't like. And your
yeah,
only success, what I mean? Like, we don't like to go down the ladder. We get rolling eyes and whatever and mad faces and the whole, 13-year-old tantrum inward. But yeah, once you push that, yeah.
I get you. I get you totally. Hey, Pamela, you want to accept panelists because anything we drop into the chat will be available when you're a panelist. Doesn't mean you have to have your video on or any of that stuff. It just means that you'll have availability to the chat. The chat will be disabled if you're not a panelist. So just a little reaction, go down to your little button down at the bottom that shows your reactions, or raise your hand. Raise your hand if you're interested in me going down this rabbit hole of fear, and then we can start handstand work and stuff after that. And of course, next week. Okay, I've already got one hand up, or you can put something in the chat, either way, whatever's easiest. Just put a Y for yes, I want to go down this rabbit hole of helping a 13-year-old understand neuroscience. That's not just 13-year-olds, young athletes as well. 13 is the more challenging age because they are developing their own opinions, and depending on their makeup, right? Like their constitution. Some of you might be like their zodiac or their astrological sign or whatever, but how athletes come into this world depends on how rigid their thinking is. And of course, in that period of teenage years, it does become a little more rigid. Okay, so I'm getting 3 or 4 yeses, so we're gonna go along this path. So a couple things that we want to talk about when it comes to fear. So we have already talked about this before in the past. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on it. And one thing, Carla, is that this is recorded and on YouTube. So this is really helpful to share with them information, right? So that it's coming from someone who like literally deals with this every day. And it's coming from the neuroscience perspective, why we're doing these things and why we need to continue to do those things. So fear, like we've talked about before, fear is really just, it's doing its job. Fear is a symptom from my brain, right? Stress, fear, anxiety, and even pain are all just information given to my brain to get me to pay attention. So fear is telling me to pay attention to something. So the question always is, what is fear telling me? Well, of course, fear is telling me, one, am I prepared? Am I strong enough? Do I have enough range of motion? Can I do it? Right? And of course, this athlete you're talking about, she's conditioning, she's working out, she's got flexibility, et cetera. She should have those things, right? So that's one thing fear is telling me. So have we checked that box? Am I prepared? Did I do my homework? The next thing that fear could be telling me is, what do I have the right information? Like, so many times we talk about the vestibular system and going backwards, especially, is that if the information coming in from my inner ear and my eyes aren't matching, and there's a discord between the information coming in and maybe the information I'm also receiving from my proprioceptors. So I'm getting information from a lot of different places. You've got 6 senses, you've got the 5 senses that we talk about on the physical plane. We also have intuition, right? And a lot of athletes are actually very intuitive and do intuitive movements. So you can't forget about that 6th sense. So you have these 6 senses coming in and bringing information in. Along with those senses, besides the hearing and the vision, is the actual inner ear, right? The fluid and where we are in space and all of that information, as well as the proprioceptors, little bitty receptors inside all of our joints that are giving us information onto the surfaces we're touching, where we are in space, where our body position is, all of those things, which all work with our motor map in our brain of where we are. So if I have a fuzzy motor map because I had an injury or because I haven't used something in a while, or maybe I haven't gone backwards in 2 months, then my motor map is going to be fuzzy. And that may be a part of my part, is my motor map is fuzzy. The other part could be that I've had a small tweak. Believe it or not, does not take a lot to mess up a joint receptor. A little side tweak where they like tweak it, but didn't really roll it. It's not really swollen. Those are little injuries to the receptors. And if you don't take time to make sure the joint's moving properly and happy, and don't retrain those little receptors with some balance training, et cetera, that can last and stay there. And maybe it doesn't bother them until they hit another growth spurt. So making sure that your athlete has good balance, standing on one leg, eyes open, eyes closed, standing on a flat surface, standing on a soft surface. Change your head position. Does it change when they change their head positions with their eyes closed? When I'm changing head positions and moving, I'm looking at the vestibular system more often than I am the proprioceptive system, the little joint receptors. So if anywhere along that system, there's an issue, the brain's information, when it comes in and it's a little off, the brain's only job is to protect us, keep us alive. So it'll put the brakes on. It'll say pause, stop, balk, don't go. And that might happen in the middle of the air or may happen beforehand because it's happened enough times where it's experienced that they don't really know where they are in space. Some athletes know they don't know where they are in space. Many of them think they know where they are in space, and they don't. And you can see that when their movements change. Like if you watch the movement, you'll see the movement changes. You can test their vestibular system, having them move their head while doing balance activities. If they cannot stand and move their head, or can't walk in a straight line and move their head up and down or side to side, up and down, they may have a vestibular issue. And guess what? You can train it that same way. Now, that's a very simplistic, rudimentary way of training the vestibular system. But there are lots more specific ways we can do it, and we can go down that journey and path if you guys would like to at some point about how to train the vestibular system, in particularly when it comes to fear of tumbling backwards. I will tell you that I have found that there is multiple facets to fear, and one of those facets that gets missed a lot is the vestibular system and the information getting put from the ears and the eyes to the brain when you're going backwards in that 360 plane backwards. So there's momentum information that's coming in. There's spatial information coming in. There's a bunch of stuff happening in the inner ear, just to kind of like bring it all down to one thing. So that's one piece that gets missed and we need to look at. So if you work your way up to a ladder and then you get to the top of the ladder and they got the skill for a week or two and then they come back, if there's not an outside external factor, which we'll talk about in a second, you might want to look at the vestibular system, because it might be that they do okay with enough willpower, but at some point the vestibular system says, I still don't know where I am, and they put the brakes on. And so, but the other thing is external factors is that our alarm system doesn't care. When we're overwhelmed or overloaded, it will come out in all different places. And one of the great places for it to come out in an athlete is in their sport. And it comes out through fear. And it may just be that they've lost control or autonomy somewhere. And then I've had athletes do that. They literally just lost autonomy with their life. They lost choices, or they feel they have no choices. And this does tend to happen around teenagehood because they're getting into junior high and there's all these requirements happening and they're dues, must do's. And there's not a lot of choice. So it's like, can we offer them must do's on their homework? Like, do you want to do math first or do you want to do English first? Do you want to do math on Monday and English on Tuesday? Doesn't matter. It's going to have to happen. But can we give them a choice on when these things are happening that they don't have choices on? Can we have a choice on how long they do them before they get to do something they enjoy for 5 minutes and then go back to it? Like, how can we create a space where we can give some autonomy in places where we know we are teaching them to do things they don't necessarily want to do? So that's one other aspect. You know, any kind of family stresses also can affect fear. My fear creeped up when my parents divorced. I was really straining my brain to get that flight on beam, flick lay, it's on beam. It was a beautiful flick lay, but it was a lot of work to do it and to get it done. So I was pushing myself through it. And then when my parents divorced, that was it. I was in a small town and it was too much for my alarm system. And it came out in the fear. And I didn't realize that, right? Now, the next part of this process that we have to talk about, which is why it's so important to have a ritual that is positive, is that when the fear has gone on long enough, and or, so this is the other part, fear also sometimes develops when an athlete learns a new skill, they get that skill for a period of time, a week or two, and then they lose it. Now, we need to talk about this because this is part of normal neural development. It's called emerging skills, and then it regresses, and then it reemerges. It's a reemerging skill. And so this happens all the time. If you think about when your child first walked, you go, Mom, like grandma, right? It's grandma, like, Mom, grandma's come for the weekend. Guess what? She walked this week, or she walked yesterday. Come look, come on, Sally. And we're like, come on, walk, you can do it. And they crawl to you. Or they don't get up at all. And you're like, oh, they walked just yesterday. I saw it. I know it. It was beautiful. She took 3 steps. And like, you're like, and it doesn't happen again for another week or two. It's called neural pruning. A new motor skill will develop. And it's so new, the brain has to go in and neural prune, has to go in and clean up that highway. And during that phase where their neural pruning is happening, the skill will disappear. There's a disappearance of the skill. So you have emergence of an early emergence of a skill, and then you have a disappearance, and then you have a reemergence. During this disappearance phase, it is so important to allow it to happen and to be like, your brain is totally doing its job right now, and this is when your skill is getting better. So believe it or not, if you think back to that kid who walked and then didn't walk when grandma showed up the weekend, and a week later, all of a sudden they're like walking 10 steps, they're running away from you. You can't keep track of them. And you said, oh man, why didn't we do the rest of that childproofing stuff we should have done? Like 3 months ago or 2 months ago or a month ago, whatever we thought, when we thought we should do it and we didn't do it. Every parent does this. You know, then you're like, they're off to the races and they look amazing, and their technique, and like when you're like a geek like me, you're looking at their movement and going, wow, it's so much more solid. Like before, they're little weebly wobbly, and then all of a sudden their walking just starts, their balance, their feet starts to come closer together. They're more upright, their hands aren't out reaching for things. And it happens with that reemergence. And so what happens is during that disappearance phase, the brain is cleaning up that motor pattern that you get. Now, where we go wrong, and this is natural part of any new skill, new learning. This also goes for algebra and math and science and memory and all of these things. So anything new that we learn and take in and we don't have a foundation for it, this is very, and even if we have a foundation for it, if that foundation is not really solid or very extensive, it is common for you to have this emergence, disappearance, and reemergence. And so this is important because where things go astray, is that me as an athlete go, I got my round of back handspring back tuck. Yes, And she goes and she rings the bell and puts it on the wall, gets so excited, go home and tell mom. And then the next week, I can't do it. I can't connect it. My arms are bent. It's really horrible. It looked so good last week. And so maybe it looks like they're still doing it, but it's not as pretty as it was, or it's not as nice. And it's like, why couldn't you just do it the first way you did it the first time? Or the kip. The kip is a really great one where it emerges and disappears. And so I just have a question, and just in the chat, how many of you guys have had this with your athlete or with your athletes where you've seen a skill emerge, disappear, and then reemerge? Yep, Trista's got it. And yeah, Brianna, yep. There's a bunch of yeses, like with exclamation marks. Yeah, good. Okay. I figured all of you did. I just wanted to check in because I'm doing a lot of talking. So yes, so everybody here has seen this somewhere in their time of coaching or with their own athletes. And so this is where we go astray. One, the athlete's internal dialogue about it. And two is our reaction as a parent and a coach. And we do it unknowingly. Like if I had known this before, I would have probably said differently to a lot of athletes I coached, right? But it's like, so sometimes I would say to the athlete, it's okay, you had it last week, we'll get it, right? But see, still my emphasis was, we had it last week. And so they heard, I had it last week, why can't I do it now, right? And sometimes we'd ask, well, why can't you do it? You did it yesterday. Come on, just one more. You can do it, right? Like, and we're trying to be encouraging and trying to remind their brain that they've done it before. But in reality, we're feeding a kind of the bad wolf. We're feeding that self-judgment record that they've already kind of started, especially if they're in their teenage years, about why can't I do it? All my peers are doing it. All my teammates are doing it. They're passing me up. If I don't get this, I'm not going to get that. Right. So if I don't get this skill, I won't get this, I won't get that. They're all the way down to college and they're only a level 5. Thinking like, oh my God, if I don't get this KIP, I'm never going to get college scholarship. Like there are athletes, depending on their constitution, how catastrophic their brain will go, how far it'll go. But even just those athletes who are going, I had it yesterday, why can't I do it today? That's feeding kind of this negative lion. And if we just take a moment and say to them, hey, this is totally normal. This is part of how your brain learns new skills. And this is actually the part where your brain is refining this skill. I can't wait till your brain gets it back. We're just going to step down and do all the drills and all the conditioning we were doing, everything that we were already doing before that helped you get it. So for instance, when that baby goes to walk, right, but they don't, right, we want to put them back to crawling. Crawling is where they develop their central stability system, their head control, their arm and leg alternating positions, which is necessary for walking and running. All of those things come from crawling. So actually, we want to put the child back down a level on the rung, and work there, not as a punishment, not as anything. It's as this is actually how your brain works. And while you're crawling, your brain is refining. Your brain tried something new and it got a new highway started. But when we back you back down to that crawling, you're going to refine all the patterns that you need in order to walk again. And in a week or 2, maybe 3, could be how big the skill is. Maybe it's 4 if it's a really big, difficult skill with a bunch of timing stuff like Tkachev's or big releases and things like that. Give them some time and like, this is a big skill. It may take us a couple weeks, but that's okay because this is when your brain is neural pruning, and we want to nourish your brain with all the strength and coordination and neural firing patterns and movement patterns that we need at a lower level, at a place where you're getting stronger and doing it, so that when your brain has pruned and refined all of those little patterns, you're just off to the races and running, just like the toddler. Now, it naturally happens with motor development, but what happens in sport development is we forget about it, and we try to keep pushing them to walk when they're not ready to walk. Their brain isn't ready. Their brain is neural pruning. And so we're pushing something that the brain is saying, whoa, I'm not done creating the highway. And you're going to get the breaks every time, or you're going to get timing that's not good, broken form, things that aren't really looking like they did when they first emerged. I'll never forget, I caught my Tkachov like really beautifully the first time I learned it. And I caught like 5 in a row that day. And I could not catch another one for like a month. And we kind of maybe created a little error because then I was like, I'm bad at decachos. I just need to move on to another release move. And that began a series of Brandi trying release moves on bars and none of them sticking. And that's what we did. We just kept doing that. And I look back now and I go, oh my, I wish I had known. I wish I had known. So that's one aspect we want to really spend time on, is spend time teaching your athlete about the neural pruning process. And when this happens, just encourage them, right? Now, this also brings us back to Carla's thing about working our skill progression ladder and about backing back down. And so we're going to talk about that. Let me take a quick look. Yeah, so when E says she lost it, I tell her it's not lost. We know exactly where it is, just need to reconnect. That's a great one, Patricia. So Patricia's talking about her daughter, and she says that whenever her daughter says that something has been lost, she reminds her it's not really lost, that we know exactly where it is. We just need to reconnect. And so really what's awesome is that the next step to that is reconnection happens at the lower level of the ladder. Like that's where our brain reconnects. Our brain reconnects by going back to the foundations of what got us there. And so one way to look at this I call is the pyramid of performance. And let me see if you guys can see this. Okay, you can, but of course the words are probably backwards. So what we have down here at the bottom is basic movements, right? So we have basic movements, then we have drills, and then we have the actual skill at the very top of the pyramid. And so this is how our body actually, and our nervous system and our brain actually works. We need a large movement menu down here and basic movements, right? And so, sorry, this thing moves. We need a large movement menu down here at the basic movements. And so that is stuff like crawling, rolling, squatting, jumping, push-ups, basic conditioning and coordination, and all kinds of foundational movements, heel raises in a bunch of different directions, variations of movements happen down here. And then here we have drills that look more like the skill, but I also challenge people to still have drills that look opposite. So make sure we're working both the front and back end of the body, not just the front end of the body. And then at the top, we have our skills. And so when we're training, we actually want like 60 to 70% of our training to be down here, and the other 30% at the top of the pyramid where we're actually doing skills. And so we want to always remember that if something's not working out here, it's likely because of a problem down here. There may be something going on here, but it's almost always a problem down in the foundational movement. Yeah, so Patricia says that's the tough part. Going down the ladder is frustrating for her because she knows she can do it. I tell her taking a step back is not failure. So that is the key. We have to really show them that taking a step back is not failure. So we have to talk about like how our brain works, right? So when I learn a skill, I have to go A to B to C to D, right? And so my brain learns to take A to B to C to D highway. So an example I talk about this is when you get up every morning and get in your car and you back out of your driveway and you're going to drop your children off at school. For me, I take a right out of my driveway, I take a left on the street, I take another left, I go to the stop sign, I take a right, I go straight through a light, and then I go another block or so straight, get in the right lane, turn, take a left to park, and then walk my daughter across the street to the school. That's how I do it every morning. Now, it's Sunday, and it's time for me to go to church. Brandi gets in the car, she backs out of the driveway, she takes a right, then she takes a left, takes another left, and begins to drive to school. And halfway through realizes I'm going to church. And church was a right out of the road, out of the driveway, and not a left. And so we have to create a highway that is so ingrained on a skill that Brandi gets out on a Sunday and takes it anyways. And so in order to get so ingrained in that, we have to do the same thing over and over. And sometimes we don't have to do as many. When we're first building the highway, I have to look at the GPS. I have to like keep going. Yeah, Madhu wants to know the magic number. You know, so, but when I first build a highway, I have to do every single step. Who was it? Someone unmuted. Go ahead.
It said I was referring to how many times I've gone to the wrong location.
I don't speak up again. It's just a little rocky. How many times?
I ended up in the wrong location and wondered how I got there.
Oh gosh, Madhu, your connection's not good. Can you type it in the chat? How many times are you asking? Oh, how many times you've done it? Okay, so you're saying how many times, type in the chat. How many times, yeah, how many times you've gone the wrong location. Yeah, I'm telling this story because it's very familiar and you're wondering how you got there. Yeah, I've actually gone all the way to the school before and gone, oh wait, it's Sunday. We're supposed to go to church. And I'm not even dressed in like my normal, like drop alley off at school, like gear. I'm dressed in like church gear. And I'm like, what happened? How did I get here? Yeah, so this is neuroscience at its best, is that we created a behavioral pattern. We created a highway. What we created is that we get in the car and that car triggered. Sometimes it's the keys, sometimes it's the car, maybe it's getting in the car with the child, right? Like there are probably a couple triggers that together correlated to my brain, it's time to go to school, right? And so what we want to do is create multiple hooks, right? Like multiple, when you're thinking about Pavlov's law, the dog, the food, the bell, the dog, the food, the dog salivates, the bell, the dog, food, salivate, bell, dog, food, salivate, bell. You want to create multiple bells because when they took the food away and he just rang the bell, the dog salivated, right? So ultimately, when we're trying to create a scenario where an athlete is getting over fear, we want to create as many bells as we can hooked to it. So we want to have a feeling of confidence. We want to have a feeling of success. We want to have the actual proprioceptive and vestibular feeling of moving through the skill safely. We want to hook it to being at the gym. We want to hook it to being on a mat. We want to hook it to being on the apparatus that they're supposed to be on. We want to create a highway. And where we get in trouble, Carla, and this is the part that I would say to your athlete also, hopefully they'll come listen to this, is that where we get in trouble is when we decide that we don't have to take a right and it's okay to take a left or to skip one of those turns and think that I'm going to still make it to D if I decide to take a little route over here and I just want to go over here. And so now if I decide that like I'm only going to go step A and then I want to do this different step S, but I still want to make it to D, to think that the brain after doing this is going to want to do this thing, it's not going to happen. And what you'll get is inconsistency. You'll get inconsistency every single time. So for instance, to this day, that flight that I had to get over, that flick lay on balance beam, I literally can stand up and I do exactly what I do before I did it then. So I stand, my feet are already placed on the balance beam. I go here, I can see a balance beam underneath my legs right now. And I go in my head, out, out, out. I used to do it out loud at first, but in my head, I say to myself, hands, beam, feet, beam. So I go hands, feet, beam, feet. Sorry, I just got it wrong. I go, hands, feet, beam, feet. Hands, feet, beam, feet. You got this. And you saw my arms moved in rhythm. It's as if I did a flick lay. Like, because why? I did literally 30,000 of these. I tracked them in my piggy bank, became a fun thing to do. But at first it was a way of getting over the fear. How many flick lays could I do anywhere? Floor line, low beam, middle beam, high beam, beam with mats, beam without mats, beam with roads, beam with whatever. And I marked them down at the end of every workout in, first I did them in my locker. And then as I got really good at it, I just remembered how many I did. And when I walked into my dorm room, I marked them down. By the time I was done with 4 years of college, I did more than 30,000 flick lays. And it was like a fun game because my confidence level was like, dude, you've done this many. There's no issue. You've got the A to B to C. Like you're fine. But the same thing every single time, right? And I did the mental set, I did the breath, and I went. And I always did the mental set with, guess what? Same hand movements. I'm 43. I was 22 the last time I did that flight, or 23, right? Like and while I was doing hand movements, I was already starting with my idea of hands, feet, beam, feet. By the time I was done with it, I was taking a nice breath and I went, right? And so the thing is that we have to have the ritual and the routine. But guess what? I always did a handstand flick, a flick, a flick lay on the floor line. And then when I got on the beam, I warmed up a handstand flick and a flick lay that I went. It was the same warm up every single time. If you don't have a good, strong ladder and a good foundation, then you have nowhere to back up to for their brain to really hook into that positive, like, oh my gosh, come on, positive movement, like the positive loop, their brain loop, right? Okay, for some reason it's going to make me erase this. That's fine. I was trying to create a little more space here on my little device here. So it's really important that this is part of their process. So when I do ladders with athletes, so we said tumbling backwards, right? So let's just do a basic skill, like a round off back handspring. Okay, so when we create a ladder, at the very top of the ladder, we have round off back handspring, self, hard floor. And so then I asked the athlete, what is it that we need to do to get there? What's the beginning of that? What can you do right now? Well, I can already do a round off stop back handspring. Okay, well, that's not quite connecting. So what can we connect, right? So, oh, before I move on to this, I do want to know, do you only count the ones that are good when you did the piggy bank? And how did you deal with not getting it, preventing you from affecting the next one? Okay, so for me, the piggy bank was just go, period, because my problem was going. Now, at some point, if I wanted to, I could narrow it down once I've gone for it a lot and gotten consistent with going. Then I can narrow it down to 0.25 or less deduction, or a small wobble or less. Then I can narrow it down to hitting only, right? But when you're talking about fear, like the ingrained fear I had, I was literally in high school calculus going, it's Monday, it's a flight day. I'm sweating, my hands are sweating, my heart is beating out of my chest, my breath is like restricted. I literally was in that state. That's how fear had ruled my world at that point. And so if you're in that state of fear, you're not worried about hitting. You're not worried about even that 0.25 deduction on my left back knee, which, by the way, I never cleared out. I know now more that I could probably clear it out, but I don't have the time or energy nor the desire, right? My flick lay with my 0.25 deduction that still exists. Like when I do one on a tumble truck right now, to this day, that 0.25 is still there because that's the neural highway I developed. I made that autopilot. A, B, C, D, and D was a beautiful flick lay that hit every single time with a 0.25 bent left back leg on the layout. And that's what my neural highway was and is still to this day. So when you have that level of fear, you're just going for go. You're just going for go. And if you can clean it up to a point where their confidence level is much higher, then you can start being, particular about things. But really, when you're dealing with fear, you're just wanting them to go. You need the brain to be successful. So I'm only counting. So when it comes to piggy bank, I count anything that goes, anything that connects. So if it's a skill, it's a single skill, then it's not worried about connections, right? It's just worried about getting up to the skill, right? And if it's like, let's say it's a handstand on the high beam and they won't even go, because they're so afraid of hitting vertical, they won't even go to a handstand, then any handstand, anywhere from 45 to 90, I'll count it. Feet left the ground, that's a handstand to start with, right? Because they get really afraid of that going to vertical, right? And that's also probably partially a vestibular issue, working on like forward movement of the head with the vestibular system. But then once they get the hang of that and they're just going, then maybe you could say, okay, anything that hits vertical, we'll count that, right? But let the athlete decide. That's the important part. What do you count as part of the confidence builder piggy bank? Now, if you have the perfectionist that Carla's talking about, you need to suggest to her that everything counts. And you tell her everything counts, because she's going to say only ones that are perfect, that stuck, that are on some crazy beam that she's not even going on. And so you've got to help know your athlete, because in that case, we have to help them out and say, look, all of these things count because you're building that highway, that A to B to C to D highway. Like, I want the highway to be built, and I don't care where, I don't care what's underneath it. I don't care if coach stands there 5 feet away. It doesn't matter to me. The other question you said is, how do you deal with not getting it, preventing you from affecting the next one? You just go back to the ritual, which I'm going to give you here in a second. So if I don't get the first one, and I feel like, okay, I'm going to try again, and I try again, I still don't get it, or I don't go for it, you get 2 balks. So when I'm working the ladder, the rules of the ladder are that you get 2 balks, so 2 times that you don't go for it before you have to go down 1 or 2 rungs, and I leave leeway. See how I left some autonomy? You can go down 1 or 2 rungs. That's up to you. And you work those rungs again and come back up. And it's not a punishment. It's that I want you to keep working A to B to C to D. And I don't care where you do A to B to C to D. I just don't want you going A to S. A to S does not get me to D. And A to S is me doubting, is me seeing myself crash in my head. A to S is, I can't do this. Oh God, this is horrible. Or one of my athletes is just, ugh. She makes a noise. And that noise comes with this negative like connotation, right? That does not get her to do A to D. It gets her A to S and off the highway. And so some of my athletes like to talk about it like it's a real literal highway, and they pick something they really like. Like one of the athletes I worked with, she was working round up handspring layout and full, and she called her happy highway, the highway where she went for things and where everything looked good. She called that her French fry highway because she loved French fries. But when she would balk or not go for something, she called it a Brussels sprouts highway. She says, I don't want to take Brussels sprouts. Now, I love Brussels sprouts, but she did not. So you could say lima bean, Brussels sprouts. You could say whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Something you don't like. It's my black highway, my red highway. I like the color red. It's my favorite color. Then that's their highway. But they get to name their highway. But the highway that we want to take is the one that they want, right? So it's their French fry highway, their red highway. We don't want to take the Brussels sprouts highway. And if we take the Brussels sprouts highway more than 1 or 2 in a row, I now am training the Brussels sprouts highway. I'm now training A to S, and that is not going to help you with your end goal. So always making sure that they hop off the highway. And sometimes you just say, oops, went the wrong highway again, because they made an autopilot. Because they've been balking and having so much fear, and because of the self-judgment, they create a highway that's not the highway that we want. So you have to remind yourself to hop off the highway, get the GPS back out. And the GPS is this. Your skill ladder is your GPS. That's how you get back on the highway. And then tracking in your piggy bank. So I literally have them draw. Oh, now it's going to be nice and fancy. I have them draw a cool little piggy bank. Oh, man. Okay. You guys don't laugh. Or you can laugh. Okay, she's going to be sleeping. Sleeping pig. But I have them literally draw on a really big piece of paper. This is smaller because I'm just doing it. But I have them draw their own piggy bank and start to track. Right? I just have them draw a little piggy bank, and I have them start to track all of their successes wherever they are. And so this might be the back handspring bank. Or you can even call it your back handspring confidence bank. If you want to put the word confidence in there, you can call it confidence bank. But you know, whatever it is, but it's their bank, right? It's their back handspring bank or their roundup back handspring bank or whatever they want to call it. But this is they're only tracking that one skill, and they're only tracking successes. They're not tracking any of the failures. And the success you define by, if it's a big fear, going. And you go anywhere and you count it. Because every time their body's going through it, whether it's on the low beam, on the floor line, on a laser beam, on a roads, or whatever they're on, it's successful. Whether it's with a spot, without a spot, doesn't matter at first, especially if the fear is really big. They just need their body to go through it. Okay, so let's see. As I'm thinking. Oh, yeah. Okay, so Maju's daughter is having trouble getting vertical to handstand on balance beam. And part of it is, tracking it. And you know, I would, at that point with that handstand, because she's little, she's like 7, I would just count anything that goes from 45 to 90 and call it a handstand and be happy with it for now, right? And just say, okay, keep going. Anything she goes for, right? Because if she's having trouble going for it, now if she's going for it and that's not the problem is just getting to vertical, then narrow your window to 80 to 90, right? Like if she's not a problem going for it, she's like, she's going, but she just keeps going to 45, right? Then I would narrow your window more to like, 60 to 90, 80 to 90, something like that, and just start counting it. And then, yeah, we'll work towards the handstand. Yeah, perfect. And so with handstand work, forward stuff, the vestibular is going in a forward direction. Same thing with cast handstands on a high bar. So there can be a vestibular component to the forward handstand part. But the thing that I want to talk about really quickly about how I do skill ladders is that at the bottom, I actually create some really basic stuff. Like I want you to do a round off so if round off by handspring is their thing, I want you to do just a round off. I want you to do just a standing back handspring. Can they do those by themselves? If they can't do them by themselves, okay, then what do we need to do? Do they need to go to the tumble track? Do they need to do them on the floor? Do they need a spot? Do they need someone to stand there? What's our progression for that? Right? And so now I want a single round off. I want a single back handspring. And now how about we connect something? Can they connect a back walk over back handspring, but they can't connect a round back handspring? I have a kid like that right now. Connecting back walk over back handspring or back handspring, but cannot connect a round off back handspring. And part of that is the vestibular component is that when you do a round off, the head has to go down, around, and then go backwards. And so she can go backwards, which is the same plane. But the moment you add a round and a backwards to it, her vestibular system has some trouble and it creates fear. And so we have to work on some of the vestibular stuff.
Well, that's
Yes, Carla.
Oh.
What
Sorry,
did you have for us? Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Is it a mistaken?
I was telling Alexa off.
That's all right. It was a mistaken unmute. That's no worries. No worries.
I guess with your backtracking, like, I mean, I had my own son had this, but see, I also understood the longevity of it, and like I had no time frame, and but I also understand, like from a parent standpoint of view, like I am spotting a round of handspring. I'm doing nothing. I sit there. It's been a very long time now. But I mean, for me, eventually, I know that she's just going to. She'll just be like one day and be like, "This is silly. I just don't need you." But she's also in the fact of like, won't do like backward roll back handspring, won't do round up back handspring down an incline, won't do like all these drills. She says scares her. So like, where's the coach? Like, okay, she only will do it one place. Like, do I
So the thing
encourage
about
those
going
other
down and
things?
one thing really quick about going down an incline or decline is that increases the momentum. And if they're having a vestibular issue, that's going to be scarier because they actually don't know where they're coming from. So one reason why athletes will go round off, stop, swing their arms back handspring, is they slow the momentum from the round off, which is a vestibular issue.
Yeah, but she doesn't. She doesn't when she runs, but she doesn't when she runs. She doesn't when and it's not just that. Like I've given up the round off one down the incline, that kind of stuff, and the backward roll. The thing is that it's also like on beam. You know what I mean? Like she decides what drills she will and will not do.
Will she do a round off backward roll, like on the floor?
Round off rebound backward roll.
Round off rebound backward roll, not a round off bend the knees backward roll.
Like, yeah, no, that's she's too powerful for that. I know what she is afraid of. She is afraid of her own power of gift. And I totally understand why, you know what I mean, she is, but she's also a perfectionist child. And then I also understand when, you know, I've had the perfectionist children that work really hard when they're working and they think they're working really hard. But like you said about just going, you know, sometimes I'd much rather them not make it for a very long time until they've actually gone for a very long time, like a back handspring on beam, you know what I mean? Because I know as soon as they put their feet on that beam, then that's the only thing they accept. And so then you end up standing there. Like I've had gymnasts then stand there because Yeah, they've actually put the perfectionist in their head that the only thing that mattered was getting on the beam, and I could care less. Please just
Yeah.
do a bunch. And so I did the whole thing like you I even did the you can't count. Um, you can't count ones you make. You can only count the ones you go. Um, anything
Yeah,
to
just
try to
count the
get,
ones that you go. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
So with this athlete, so she's got a lot of power. So it does sound like a vestibular component with the momentum coming into the round of back handspring.
yes.
I want to kind of give you a couple drills, I think, to try with her. Can she do a round up by handspring? Like, will she do it elsewhere, like on the tumble track or air track or like anywhere else?
Know her by herself. Like she will take me anywhere. And
Okay.
and I
So
go anywhere with her. So
has she made herself a what does her skill ladder look like? So I can do a single round off. I can do a single back handspring. They're all by myself. Maybe I can do a round off stop back handspring by myself. But
yeah,
what
she does all
about
that. Those are all in her run.
okay?
All
And
in
then
her,
what's the next part
oh,
on her
from the
ladder?
well, I tried like backward roll back handspring. Um,
Uh-huh. Or
I've
back
tried
walk over back handspring. Can she do a back walk over back handspring or back handspring back
she
handspring?
can. She can
By yourself?
on given days. Yep. Back handspring, she'll take me with her. But a back walkover one, I wouldn't connect it if I was judging it. But it's more connected than
Yeah, is her head moving? Like I get it. So for me, like, so I get like, like the leg touch down first, but the body's still not moving.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the question and that's a judgment thing. But for me, I want their head to keep moving. So as long as her head, because that's the part you're trying to train is the vestibular system connecting into something.
Mhm.
So is her head still moving on the back walker by hamstring by herself?
Well, unfortunately when she decides she wants to go, um like technique kind of goes out the way. So I guess her head is moving because she's pitching it back. Like, I mean, she's throwing it.
Okay.
Versus leaving, versus the arms.
Right, leading with the arms. Um,
Mhm.
okay, and then can she do back walk over, back walk over?
Yep.
Okay. And back handspring, what was that? She has to have a spot.
Yeah, she takes me with her.
Okay, so does she have any of these in her ladder?
Yeah, they're all in the ladder.
I would love to see her ladder. So it's like back walk over. So does she go round off back handspring, round off, stop back? So she goes round off. She goes back handspring. Then does she put in the back walkovers, or then does she put in the round off stop back handspring? What does she put in there?
Oh, you mean after the round of back
Yeah,
handspring?
well, no, after the round off by itself, back handspring by itself, what does she go to next?
Oh, we go to back walkover, back handspring.
Okay, so she does back walk over, back handspring
Yeah,
by
and I tried
herself
to put in
or
back.
with a
Yeah,
spot.
no, nope.
Okay, so back walk over, back handspring by herself successfully. And then from there, what does she do?
Well, she'd rather just take me everywhere. So that's where I'm trying to come up with like, will you do back handspring down an incline? Will you do back handspring on the floor? Will you do back
Will
handspring
she do back
on the
handspring, back
tumble
handspring
track?
on the tumble track? Yeah.
So,
So
but
what will,
she goes to taking me as soon as
so
you
okay, so
start
the
after
next
the
step
back
is with the
walkover, which
spot.
is slow, then she takes me.
Right. See, there's a momentum thing happening with the vestibular. Something needs to
Yeah,
happen with the vestibular
yeah.
system. So back
Figure the
handspring, back
backward roll is a
handspring.
little bit faster than a back walkover can be, but
Yeah, so back handspring with a spot. And then from there, what surface does she do it on? What surface is she most comfortable with? With the spot.
oh, she would really just want. I mean, if it was up to her, I would just stand there and spot a round up back handspring on the floor,
Right, but we're
and
not
they're
doing that.
fine.
So no, it's not about what's up to her. So in her, well, I mean, it is, but like
I
we
know.
need to help her get there. So like the ladder on the back handspring, where does she prefer to do it at first? Does she prefer to do it with a spot on the
Tumble
tumble
track,
track? Okay,
tumble track.
so then you would go back handspring with a spot on the tumble track. Then from there, what does she need next? Back handspring with you 5 feet away, with you standing there, with you completely gone. Like what step? So if we wanted to break it, if it's an
Yeah,
athlete who really got a lot of fear.
that is where we are, and that's
Mhm.
what I've asked. Like, okay, what is our next? I'm sitting here, I'm using my hands. Can I just sit down and put my arms down? Does that bother? Does that make you a little nerve? You know what I mean? Like, does it? Where? Yeah. So that's kind of where we're discussing. Like, can I move back a little bit? Or would you rather me go from like an up kneeling to a lower kneeling? Would you like me to, do you know what I mean? What is progression, but I have to move. I have to
Are
switch
you
position.
asking her this question in the middle of working the ladder? Like, are you
Yes,
already in workout and saying, okay, you did this piece, now what?
I've done both.
Okay. Yeah, because you need to have the ladder set before. So
Yeah.
doing the ladder in the middle of fear or as fear is creeping in is not going to work out. So you'll have to
No,
have the ladder set.
that's the ladder that all our children have to do connecting round of handsprings.
But are you giving her this ladder or is she getting to choose this ladder? Because that's the other part. You really got to make sure she chooses it.
She gets to choose the ladder, but she just can't choose to skip all of them.
Right. So like she can choose. So I mean, I'm taking you through a skill progression, right? But some athletes don't need someone to stand there. They'll go from spot to no spot.
Yeah.
Some athletes need someone to stand there. Some athletes need them 5 feet away, 10 feet away. Then they'll do it by themselves, right? Like some athletes want a spot with a hand, another one with a touch spot, or like a hand is there but not touching, and then they'll do further away. So that's the part where they get autonomy, right? Like you don't get to skip doing a back handspring unless it's like really this huge hiccup, but it's really not something we want to skip, right? You want to make sure they have a foundation of the connection. The next piece though is like also having them do how many. So like I wrote in here, round off, back handspring. Then you've got your back walkover, back handspring with a spot on the tumble track, back handspring, standing there on the tumble track, back handspring 5 feet away on the tumble track, back handspring by themselves on the tumble track. And so she gets to pick her numbers, and I sometimes allow them some leeway, like pick a range, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, right? And they don't have to be big numbers because I'm going to need you to work the ladder. So we're going to come in day 1 and we're going to do like 2 round offs, 2 back handsprings by myself. I'll do 2 to 3 depending on the day and how I'm feeling on the back walkover, back handspring. I want some spots, so I'm going to do 3 back handspring with a spot. I'm going to do 3 here, and then maybe you're 5 feet away, and I'm going to do 3 to 5 depending on the day. And then by myself, I'm going to choose just to do 3. Like this is an average, like what I see regularly. As you're getting closer to the part where they're at, they want to kind of have a range because if it's a rough day, they want to add a few extra spots or a few extra standing there. But so the next piece of this puzzle though, so you're working yourself to this, right? Back handspring. Then you're working to maybe it's a cartwheel. And the other thing you can work at the same time, which might be, is that you do a cartwheel back walkover, right? Because now you're working the head to be going in the positions it has to go in for the vestibular system. So, right here in between the back walkover, back handspring, or even the back handspring, you might go back walkover, back handspring, but you also might go right there. You might add cartwheel back handspring or cartwheel back walkover. And then you might even add, because it is a slower momentum. Once you get to back handspring, you might come back to that cartwheel again and do cartwheel back handspring, right? And so that might be something that they add in there. In order to get some more of that brain vestibular information of having to change direction, multiplanar into a back plane direction. Does that make sense, Carla?
Yes.
Is that making sense? Like adding that cartwheel. And so the cartwheel back walkover is slow.
Yes.
So if you have an athlete that's having momentum issues, cartwheel back walkover is a slow way of going through those going through those movements in the vestibular system. Then you can add cartwheel back handsprings, which speeds it up a little bit. Then you can add a standing like power hurdle round off back handspring, because then their momentum's not as fast as running, right?
Yeah.
So you can kind of go through that series and go through that cycle of, and that's where the athlete has to have some choice. Like, do I need to touch you? Do I not touch you? Do I have my arm up? Am I 5 feet away? Are you by yourself? They need to kind of pick that choice. And then also like, am I going from the tumble track to the rod floor to the spring floor? Am I going straight to the spring floor? Where am I in this, on the apparatuses? Like what's that look like? I'm trying to give kind of a formula. So, but the next piece to this though, is how you work this ladder. So, the rules to the ladder. So once I've drawn the ladder and I have my ladder drawn and then I have my numbers out to the side, Now, some athletes, but not most athletes, you got to take some pressure off. And most of those athletes, you take away these like deadline things. Some athletes need the pressure of a deadline. So you have to know the athlete. If there's a need for pressure of the deadline, have them make their deadlines off to the right so that they have, and sometimes it's not in every single rung of the ladder, but like maybe there's some major points on the ladder where they need to be like, okay, in 2 weeks, I need to have at this point of the ladder, and in 4 weeks here, and by, 8 weeks from now, I need to be here. But I let them pick their deadline if I'm doing a deadline. Most athletes I work with are perfectionist type A. And if you put a deadline on them, they stress out so far that you get nowhere. So it's not a good idea for those athletes, parents and coaches who are listening. It is not a good idea for athletes that are internally driven, that are high strung, that are already perfectionists, that are really already pissed off that they're not already at the end of the ladder and are at the bottom. They're already thinking about whatever the end goal is, and that's their main focus. That athlete's probably not going to do super well with a high stress situation of a deadline. But the next piece to this is the rules of the ladder. So I do rules of the ladder. And the first rule is that if you balk or you stand there too long, and they know what too long is, and I ask them, do you know what too long is? And they go, oh yeah, they know what's too long is. So if they balk or they stand there too long, they go down 2 rungs, 1 to 2 rungs. They get to pick. They can go down 1 rung or they can go down 2 rungs, and they complete that rung before those 2 rungs or the 1 rung before they move on. And what's really important at that part is that this is not a punishment. This is because I want you to go A to B to C to D. I don't want you to go A to S, because we know S is the wrong exit. You're taking the Brussels sprout exit, and I want you to take the French fry highway. So we got to keep you taking the right exit, because every time you take the wrong exit, I got to take the right exit twice. That's really important. For every time you take the wrong exit, the fear exit, however you want to name it, you have to take the positive exit twice. So the brain will re-ingrain that new loop, so that when you go to get in the car, you drive all the way to the school and you didn't even realize that you were at school, right? Because we want that. So one is that if they balk or they stand there too long, they have to go down 1 to 2 rungs. And I don't say have to, I say we go down 1 to 2 rungs. That's just how we train the brain, period. It's not a have to, or it's not a punishment. The other part is that they need to work the entire ladder until it becomes super confident at the top. Until you're like dead on, until super confident at the top of the ladder, like the very top rung. And at that point, you can choose a few of the things to go away, but not all of them. You're only going to choose like a couple of them. Like you might skip a couple rungs. So like instead of doing back handspring on the tumble track and here and here and here and here, I may only do 1 back handspring and I just do it on the floor. But you're going to do all of the skills on the ladder just and in order. But you might skip a few of those ones where you had extra steps with a spot, without a spot, with this equipment or that equipment. But you're still going to go through the bulk of the series, which is like a single round off, a single back handspring. I'm going to connect a cartwheel back handspring. I'm going to do a back handspring. I'm going to now go to or maybe I'm doing back handspring. Then I'm going to connect a cartwheel back handspring. Then I'm going to do a round off back handspring. Maybe I start with a power hurdle, so I'm not so much power. And then I do the rest of my passes from there, right? You don't start making that modification until you become super confident at the top of the ladder. Now, the next piece is that
Brandi, one question on this, just before you keep going. So when you say balking, is it, it's not so much going that's a problem? I mean, we've done this ladder exactly for this. I think our ladder looks very different because it started off with just cartwheels, right? But anyway, getting to the round off and back handspring. But so on a tumble track, there's really, really good form. Round off back handspring on a tumble track, perfect form. But the minute it goes to an air track or the floor, the form goes away. So it's not about going, it's about sloppy form. So is that also considered balking, or is that different?
That's different. So that's not balking, but it may be a level of fear showing up, right? Because she doesn't go as hard. She's not able to push as far. We know when there's a lion in the room, our shoulders close, our hips close, and then our form kind of goes out the window, right? So that's not balking. So balking is truly not going, right? And
Okay.
so once you've gotten to that part where she's going, then you want to start cleaning it up, right? And so, but you still want to go back to this next part with the ritual, and you want to use the ritual on the whole entire ladder. So at the very, very basic of just doing the round off or just doing the back handspring, I'm still going to do the same ritual. And by ingraining this ritual, if you haven't already got that ingrained, that may change the little bit of fear that is creeping up and creating form issues. Because it's an
Okay.
alarm system, likely an alarm system thing, right? If it's not a strength issue, then it's an alarm system issue. So if it's like a strength issue, we throw the bands on them. But if it's an alarm system issue, we need to work on calming the alarm system when we're on the new apparatus, on the harder surfaces, right? So what that looks like as far as the ritual. So rules of ladders, 1, if you balk or stand there too long, 1 to 2, you have to, you go down 1 to 2 rungs. They get to pick, you work those and work your way back up, because we want to stay on the A to D highway. And rule number 2 is you want to work the entire ladder until you're super confident at the top of the ladder. And at that point, you can start to kind of break down and make sure you're still working the ladder, but you're taking away some of the mundane extra steps, right? Then the third rule is that you want to maintain the ritual. So the ritual is very commonly what I have them do is one mental set. And they're doing the mental set with mental choreography. This is what Doc Allison Arnold talks about, mental choreography. And so they're doing the mental set with their words, which are typically action words. So you heard with me, I needed to remind myself what to look for so that I stayed present on my flick lay. You heard me say that I would say hands, feet, beam, feet. Why? Because I was getting on the high beam and turning on the vehicle, putting it in go, and jumping out of the vehicle and letting the vehicle just do the work. And most of the time, it ended up in freezing, which was like, don't go, because I wasn't in the vehicle driving. So one thing you can do is do action words so that they stay present in their body when they're doing something that's hard. So I learned to stay present by reminding myself hands, feet, beam, feet. And that's exactly what I had to see in order to nail my flick lay. I had to see my hands hit the beam, my feet hit the beam. I saw the beam when I did the layout, and I saw my feet land, and I finished. And then I took a really big breath because I was like, thank God, right? And so, but you want to have some kind of action word. So for some athletes that are tumbling backwards, it's aggressive, it's push, it's punch, it's sit, it's arms, like whatever it may be. And if it's a sequence thing, it may be like a round up handspring is like reach into the hurdle and then push or jump, reach, push, reach, jump, reaching into the hurdle and jumping, right? Those are common words, but there can be any word and they have to make it up. So I asked them, like, what do you need to do on your round up by handspring to make it the way you want it? And then they'll tell me, they almost always know, I got to be strong. I need to be aggressive. I need to be powerful. Great. Let's use that word, powerful, right? And so when they visualize the round up by handspring or whatever they're visualizing, they need to see it in their head. Can they see it in their head? If you have an athlete that cannot see it in their head, there's a way to train that. Literally get video of them if you have it. That's the best video of them doing the skill. And it doesn't really matter where. But if you can get video of them doing the skill the way they want it, that's great. If you can't, because it's a new skill and they don't have it, you find a video on YouTube of that skill of an athlete with similar body stature. And you have them watch that video 3 to 5 times over, that skill, round up by handspring, round up by handspring. While they're watching it, they need to use their words. Reach, push, reach, push, reach, push. Then you say, close your eyes, and can you see it? Reach, push, reach, push, reach, push. Okay, maybe they're seeing that gymnast. Can you see yourself now? Reach, push. And most athletes see themselves like they're on a television screen, watching a television screen. Some of them watch it like, so the only skill I trained myself to do this was my flick lay. Every other skill I saw, like I was watching on video, but my flick lay I saw like I was on a GoPro camera. And I discovered this about myself because I was jumping out of the vehicle and I needed to be present and I needed the GoPro. It was the only way I could stay present on that flick lay. But most athletes, and it works just fine, watch themselves on a video, like they're watching television or their iPad. Doesn't matter, whatever they do, that's good, because they just need to be able to see it. So if they can't see it, they need to spend some time before workout or outside of the gym in a calm space, unrelated to gym, watching this skill, whether it's themselves doing it or someone with the same stature, 3 to 5 times. And then 3 to 5 times, they do it in their head. Okay. And they're using their words while they do it. Now, the next piece is that you want to do the mental choreography. So you visualize and you use your words, action words. So visualize, action words. Then you take a nice golden lotus breath. And for those of you that, if you go to my YouTube, there's a golden lotus meditation. Just take that. They can listen to it. I have a 7-minute version and a 15-minute version. But you can do the golden lotus outside of the fear. At home, when you're laying in bed, getting ready for bed, in the car, when you're nice and calm and peaceful, like practice the golden lotus breathing when you're in a place of stillness. Now, it doesn't have to be golden lotus. It can be other meditation breathing. It can be box breathing. It can be triangle breathing. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. You can do it like that. You can also do breathe in, or sorry, hold on. Breathe in at the top of the box, hold the bottom of the box. Breathe out on the bottom of the box. Hold your breath while you're going up the top of the rectangle. So you can do box breathing, you can do triangle breathing, you can use my golden lotus. The athletes I work with love the golden lotus. It's a visualization while they do it. And they train that breath outside of the gym in a calm space. We're training a bell. All of these are bells. They're all hooks in the Pavlovian experience. And so I'm inhaling and I'm exhaling my golden lotus in a peaceful place. Now, when I go to do my visualization, I visualize myself doing the round up back handspring. I use my words, reach, push, or reach, jump, reach, push, reach, push, reach, push. And then I inhale. And then many times they just go. Or they inhale and they need a little affirmation. You got this, right? Some athletes need the word go. A lot of athletes don't. A lot of athletes, 1, 2, 3, go, or go is way too much pressure. It's like there's someone standing over them doing this. And that's not a good thing for a perfectionist type A person who's already high strung. So, you have to use that 1, 2, 3, go, or the go on a small population of athletes. I find it's not the huge population of athletes. I work with way more athletes. Maybe it's just the type of athletes that come to me, but way more athletes that need pressure off, and they need to just talk to themselves and tell themselves they got this. So when you're doing this ritual, you do it at every rung of the ladder. Now, that's the part that the kids get a little like, well, I don't need to do that when I'm doing a handstand. I don't need to do that when I'm doing a round off. You go back to the brain neurology and say, if you want to have autopilot from A to D, you need to train your mind to be able to visualize a round off and say, reach, breathe, go. Visualize the round off, reach, breathe, do the round off. And then do it on the back handspring. And now do it with Coach Carla spotting you on the tumble track, right? And you visualize yourself going, reach, push, breathe. You got this. So like if they're going to use you got this, then they need to use you got this on the round off. They need to use it on the back handspring. So they're using it every single step of the ladder. So now you're training that habit of getting in the car with the kid and going to school. And then on Sunday, getting in the car with the kid and going straight to school and realizing, oh, it's not Monday, it's Sunday. I should be going right, not left, right? We want our athletes who are having trouble with fear to create that autopilot of A to D. And so it's really important at each step that they do the same ritual. What I find with athletes who make it up the ladder and come back, there's 2 things that I find happen. 1, there's a vestibular component that got missed. 2, they've stopped doing their ritual. They take one piece out and think it's okay. And now they're taking A to S and they're not taking A to D. And so you've got to stay with the ritual. Now, eventually, you can make the ritual. So I'll actually get to where we get to the point where they mentally see themselves doing it. They say the word reach and push and they breathe. And then we'll say, okay, I want you to name that whole skill. I want you to name the whole highway. And my girl that I worked with named it French fry. So she got to the point where she could just visualize herself doing the round off bike handspring. She would say French fry, breathe, and go. Because she basically did enough of the A to B to C to D that she was able to call the whole highway French fry. And the French fry became her big bell. Now you have to train A to B to C to D every single run of the ladder in order to be able to name it French fry and get the same response every time. If you don't do the mental set, and you don't use the word action words, and you don't do something to calm the nervous system, any kind of breath, I don't care what it is, but breathing will help. Golden Lotus is the one I choose that I like the most. I found it the most effective. If you don't do those three things, then you have nothing to hook to the word French fry. And so French fry means nothing. So I hope that helps. Carla, does that help? I would sit back and look and see, because I think where things are going wrong and astray, and the reason she keeps falling off her ladder, because it sounds like you're doing a lot of everything, right? The progressions and stuff. I'm going to guess one of two things. Either she's not doing this routine, mental set, action words, and then calming the alarm system with a breath. I prefer the Golden Lotus. Or she's doing some of these things some of the time and not all of the time. And you're just not going to get a new habit, a new highway, like grooved out, and get all the construction workers building the highway if they're only showing up some of the time. So if like the cement guy only shows up some of the time, half the highway will get built. And if the dirt guy doesn't show up, there's no dirt underneath my highway. It's going to crack at some point. If the rebar guy doesn't show up, then I'm definitely going to have like a divot in my highway at some point. So I use these analogies with them because the reality is that in order to build the highway, so I live in Texas, so there's always highways under construction because Texas does do a good job of taking care of the highways. However, they're always under construction. And what it is that you will see that they build in, they bring all the things, they lay the dirt, they put in the rebar, they put in that mesh grade thing, then they put the cement truck comes, and then the asphalt guy comes, then the painter guy comes because he has to guide us down the highway, and the reflector guy because we have to guide at night as well. And these are all analogies to like things that happen when we're doing our sport, right? Sometimes I have to do stuff in the dark. Sometimes I have to do it with noisy people yelling. Sometimes I have to do it in a quiet gym. Sometimes I do it with preschoolers running by the beam. Like I have all these things. And if I don't have every single one of those guys showing up, the reflector guy didn't show up, then I don't know where to follow. Right. And so our guide is these like rules, the rules to the ladder, and using our mental set with our action choreography, action words, right? So mental choreography, which is, and you may even have some of them even do, like you saw me, I am a kinesthetic learner. So I could sit and visualize all day long, but if I don't visualize while doing, then I don't feel it. You saw Stephen, I'm going to say his last name wrong, but Stephen, the pommel specialist, right? He's over there doing his pommels and he's walking through it. And you see him doing his arms. He's a kinesthetic learner. How do I know that? That's his Rubik's Cube stuff. He's a kinesthetic learner. So he has to walk through his pommels, which is what got him to hit. And the biggest moment in his career with the most amount of pressure. No one in the US has ever, like, I don't think anyone has ever won pommels, maybe Bart Connor, but I don't think he ever won, right? Or got silver, I think, yeah, he got silver, Stephen did, right? But like the amount of pressure on him, right, for one event, and he didn't crack. Why? Well, because he did his routine. He did his mental set. There's videos all over Facebook and Instagram of him doing mental sets. You'll see one where he's walking in circles and he's doing his mental set. You see him muttering, talking. He's telling himself through the routine, push, steady, rhythm, whatever his words are, right? He's using them. They're not new. It's not the first time he's ever done it. 100%. He does it every day, every single time he goes. And that's how it becomes a habit. So where we get in trouble is, especially teenagers, when they get frustrated, they love to hop off the ladder or they skip something in their routine. And when I sit with a teenager and ask them, I find out, well, I stopped doing the breathing. Oh, I stopped using those words. Are you doing mental sets? No. So I would definitely, yeah, Suni doing her self-talk before vault. There's videos of Simone doing her self-talk before. Jordan Childs has her own. I mean, Colt Walker does a ton. You can see that. There's an Instagram. I was so proud of him, actually. He got kind of hammered. Day one of one of the events, not this year, but the year before the Olympics, it was nationals. He was doing a lot of cheering and talking and doing all these things, but he kind of didn't perform in the way he wanted to. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I actually started looking at the scores. I was in the lead and I looked at the scores. And I said, okay, that didn't work out. What are we going to do? And so part of his thing, I was like, you got to buckle down. You got to go back to the ritual. You got to go back inside. You got to use your words, do your mental sets. And so there's a video of his teammate who had just gone trying to high five him while he's in complete zone of just doing his words and getting ready for the next set. And they kind of gave him a hard time, but I was like, no, that was what he needed to do to perform what the team needed him to perform at that moment. And so it was funny. His teammate actually posted it and was like, yeah, because the teammate went like, he high-fived himself. He's like, well, I guess I'll high-five myself because he's over here in his world. But he was in the mental choreography world. He was doing his homework. He was doing his assignment so he could show up at the next event. Let's see what else. If she can do it with millions of cameras, we all can. Yeah. For sure. I mean, that's the thing is you have to, I got in college to the point where, we had 3,000 to 5,000 sometimes in the stadium, sometimes more. And I got to where, and if you've ever been to a college gymnastics meet, it's very, very loud. And if you go to a national championships of college gymnastics meet, it's very loud. I got to the point where I took 3 nice golden lotus breaths and it was me and the beam. And when I saluted, I didn't even see the judges. It was just the beam and I. And that's that level of stillness that you have to get to do really hard things. But you don't get there by just doing half the ladder or by doing one step and skipping a step. Your brain needs the ritual so that instead of jumping into the monkeys and the monkeys running awry inside, you have to have structure because the brain's going to just go wherever it'll go. And usually it's off of our highway. It's the Brussels sprout highway and not the French fry highway. So I hope this helped. I know we want to talk about handstands. I promise we'll talk about handstand shaping next time. But this is probably the most in-depth I think we've gone into how I use the ladder and the skill piggy bank and how the rules of the ladder. And check out my YouTube because there is a golden lotus on my YouTube. You can use that. Use that, though you have to train some of these things in calm states so that you can take them to more stressful experiences. Because sometimes if they've done something either wrong or not gone enough times in the same scenario, that's their bell. Like their bell could be just going to balance beam. Like for me, the bell was beam. Just thinking of the beam, looking at the beam, automatically, like that took me down the A to S highway, which was don't go. It's scary. There's something wrong. So I hope that helped. Carla, really quickly, and for anyone else, and then I'm going to have to hop off because I do have another client. I have a client waiting, but I wanted to cover this, you know me, a little in depth, Carla, right? Just a quick component about the vestibular, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about momentum. And then if you'll check out my Instagram, guys, there's like 3 or 4 fear Instagrams where you see me doing specifically back handspring stuff. So Carla, check out my Instagram for the back handspring piece. But this piece I did not do on Instagram. So there's one where I have them over the barrel and I'm using a stick. You can use any kind of stick. You can use a Sharpie, whatever. I use these little carpenter pencils, write letters on it just because the carpenter pencil is flat, doesn't roll everywhere. And I can just write letters on it so that they can see. But what I'm trying to do is the letters, you can do it with your thumb. Okay. And I learned this stuff from Yuka Seguria from Level Up Neuro. That's where we have collaborated with athletes together. But I want to give rights where rights are due. And she learned it through Z Health, which is another organization. But what you're doing with the letters is you are making the brain focus on something harder, which increases the motor cortex of your brain. So you're getting more activation of the brain, which helps you then kind of train the system a little bit more effectively. You can do it with just your thumbnail, right? And use your thumb as well if you don't have anything. But I like to use the letters because it's a little more effective. So look on my Instagram for the ones where we're going backwards and doing back handspring stuff. And then what I'll say for the momentum of moving backwards. So there's a couple components that I have found, especially with this whole round up by handspring thing, and also with vaulting, and even tumbling backwards on the beam, is that we have equipment coming closer to our face. And there's a lot of athletes that are having trouble with their eyes, converging and diverging is what it's called. And so you take the pencil and you want to go closer to the eyes, as close as you can before the eyes start to see double or get fuzzy, and then back out. And then close as you can, and then back out. And you want to do it 5 with one hand, 5 with the other. Now, this is just me standing stationary. So once they get the hang of that, okay, then I actually have them do it moving in whatever direction they're going. So if they're running at the vaults and I'm seeing them lift up, and there may be like a little bit of a fear response happening as they're running to a vault or about to punch or hurdle, I'll have them do it walking fast forward towards the vault. I'll put the vault behind them. And if they don't have the vault, we're at home, we just walk without the vault. But just have them walking forward. And so I get them moving at a pretty good clip, right? And as they're moving, they're doing this. And I do 5, I do like, if I'm going down the runway, I do 1 set with one arm and 1 set with the other, just make them equal. So they're doing both sides. If it's a backwards issue, so round up back handspring kind of thing, then I have them walking backwards while they're doing it. Okay. And again, I get them moving at a clip. And if it's if it's really a backwards thing, I'll have them look up and do it. So I change the head position. So they're here and they're moving. Okay, and you'll notice if it's a problem, they're going to weeble wobble or they're going to struggle a little bit with it. And that is because their vestibular system is really having a problem with it. Another piece that I'll do, if it's a round up back handspring connection issue, is I'll have them do head position like they're going into a round off. So if I'm going to go into a round off, I'm going to look at my letter and I'm going to go into a round off. Wait, hold on. My brain just went crooked. I'm going to go into a round off this way and I'm going to drop my head. Now what that might look like is half of an illusion. So I've even had some athletes, like there's a video on Instagram of me training an illusion with a girl to work on her round off. But it's really a half of illusion. So I'm here and then I go down with my head and then up and then I walk backwards. And so you're just training that connection where they go down with their head and then up and walk backwards. And if you can, walk backwards on your toes is really even more challenging and it activates the back chain of the body. But again, I'd have them do both directions. So I also have them do a left round off and get their head to move through the whole position. That get their head to go down and all the way up. So you really want them to go through the whole rotation and try to connect it to a backwards movement. Sometimes I'll have them do that rotation and connect it to a backward roll. If I want to do round off back handspring, I'll do that rotation component, roll backwards. And I explain to them, this is a drill for your inner ear to help you know where you are in space. Well, I know where I am in space. Great. I want you to be even better. And I want to activate all those centers in your brain. So I hope that helps a little bit with the vestibular component. Please check out my Instagram because of the back handspring stuff and also the illusion. There's I think it's 3 or 4 different posts on fear there in my Instagram. And so it's at perfect, the number 10 PT. And you go on my news feed and you'll find it. All right, guys, was that helpful? What any questions really quick before we wrap up?
That was super helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, very helpful.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Carla, did that help? Do you think that your athlete's having issues with staying consistent? She's taking out pieces, isn't she?
Oh, 100%, because you have to believe in it and you have to it takes a lot of work to stay that. It's the word I think right now, I think that I'm finding is the word consistent. Consistency.
Yeah.
Is
you have to stay consistent. You train what you get. If you don't consistently train your mind, you will not get consistent results.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. Didn't mean
You're
to put you
welcome.
off track.
No, this was great. Next week we'll do handstand shaping and I'll have the bands and everything all together. We can get ready to do some of that. So if any of you guys have bands or anything, or you want to play with stuff, you have your athletes with you, bring your bands next week. For those of you that are new, You can check out my free training at perfect10ptacademy.com. And I put the thing in the chat. So perfect, the number 10 PT academy.com, and you can get my free training. I look forward to seeing you guys. Reach out if you guys have anything. And oh, you're welcome, Trista. I'm glad you love the vestibular stuff. We can spend a whole nother time talking vestibular. So we have some requests, handstand shaping and maybe some vestibular. Is that, you'll have to let me know. Reach out to me. You have my information, guys, and let me know what you want next week. All right, everybody, have a great week. Perfect 10 PT Academy to check out and get your free training for today. Talk to you guys later.